Going to webinar, web events may be. Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
Hello, my name is Errol Mazurski and I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Leadership Program. ELP is a national nonprofit organization that provides leadership training and professional development to emerging and innovative environmental and social change leaders from academia, business, government, and nonprofit sectors. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Environmental Leadership Program's webinar series, an online platform to expand your knowledge through the expertise of ELP fellows on a diverse range of environmental and social change topics. For a full list of upcoming webinars and to learn more about our professional development programs, please visit our website at www.elpnet.org. We are actively recruiting for our 2012 leadership classes in New England as well as our Eastern Regional Network, which includes New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. We invite you to actively participate in today's program by asking questions via the chat function on your screen or by raising your hand. Today's webinar, Project Management Strategies for the Environmental Leader, features Mieko Ozeki, Sustainability Projects Coordinator at the University of Vermont and a Senior Fellow of the Environmental Leadership Program. Welcome, Mieko.
Hi, everyone. So I want to welcome everyone to Project Management Strategies for the Environmental Leader, an organizational toolkit for long-term sanity. And I usually like starting these presentations by kind of having a nice neutral image of a Zen garden. Zen gardens are kind of a very complex project, but they look so simple from the outside. And in a lot of ways, I think when doing project management, we want to design our perfect Zen garden, a place where everything's simply put and where we can basically meditate and be sane. So a little bit about myself. I'm the projects coordinator at the University of Vermont, and I've been in the Office of Sustainability since 2008. Offer organizations and schools, and I've coordinated programs and managed database systems for quite some time, and that had really prepared me for the job that I do now. When I was hired, our director was the only person for 12 years who was managing the environmental agenda of the university. And I got hired as the second full-time employee there and was charged with the following. Basically, she had been doing all these different programs and projects and initiatives, and she had asked me to set up a system to kind of get all those ideas and all those projects out of her head, making available her knowledge base, but also kind of looking at projects in a very simplistic way and being able to achieve those things. And granted, if you look at our mission statement, it's a pretty broad statement of sustainable development and environmental responsibility, and trying to strategically bridge academic activities for teaching, research, and outreach with the operations aspect of the university. So how you do that, it's a pretty big goal, but somehow you have to create a system. And so here's some of the things that I've done in terms of developing a system. So I like to start with this quote. I've been reading this book called Rework by a guy named Jason Fried and David Hansen. They're both co-founders of a project management software called Basecamp. They're co-founders of a company called 37 Signals. And I think this is a really appropriate quote to look at kind of the state of our work culture. We are indeed workaholics, and not necessarily bringing a lot of, I think we're bringing on more stress than we are getting things completed. So I think it's also worthwhile to check out the TED Talk that Jason Fried had given. He actually doesn't use PowerPoints, but I think what's fascinating is he does make some really convincing arguments about how we should balance our life and work. So that brings me to kind of the premise of this presentation. A lot of the times I think we run projects and programs and we're trying to figure out what is the life and work balance, and more so it seems like kind of the work really outweighs the life aspect. And there's also a challenge of staying focused. We're often distracted by our emails, by our smartphones, and by the constant ringing of phones or meetings and everything else, that we almost feel like we can't really stay focused on the projects that we really need to work on. So sometimes our management systems kind of look like this. If in the paper form it looks like a huge pile of stuff, and somewhere in there might be your budget for a project or something else. And the digital version sometimes looks like this, and it's totally crowded and it's kind of unmanageable. And at some point, you kind of feel like this. You feel like you're going to scream because things kind of get out of hand, and so kind of want to take a pause button and think about taking, now with a new year of kind of thinking about your systems and kind of really developing a new sense of your boundaries in your work, in terms of your work. So kind of the overview of this presentation is I'll focus on three aspects. The project management framework. So sometimes I think all of us are doing project management or program management or portfolio management, but we don't really know which one we're doing. And I think it's important to understand what is a project and what is managing a project involved. And then differentiating between a project, a program, and a portfolio. Another thing I want to hit on is sane management, and so basically more on the personal group level, kind of tips on how to develop a work plan and setting boundaries around your work time. Finally, I want to talk about more of the tool-oriented stuff, identifying project management systems that you could put in place for yourself and for your team. So let's go. So project management framework, there's a lot out there. Most of the ones, one of the most international definition of project management comes from the Project Management Institute, and they define a project management as the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. And project management involves balancing a lot of competing demands. So your project scope, your schedule, your budget, the quality of your project, resources, risks, stakeholder needs, and expectations. And on the right hand and on the left hand corner, what you'll see is the project management body of knowledge. This is a guide that is used in a certificate process to become a project manager. And it's in some of the definitions come from that. And I want to start on definitions of what a project is, what a program is, and what a portfolio is. On a kind of granular short scale, a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And the emphasis on temporary and unique. There is a defined beginning and end, and that product is it's not a repetitive process. So for instance, building a lead building is a project. There is a beginning to the process and there is an end to the process, and then you have your outcome, which is a building. Then kind of looking out a little bit further, a program is a group of related projects, and they're managed in a coordinated way to benefit and control something that is not not available from managing them individually. So basically, you can have, in my office, we have a program called EcoReps. We hire 40 students. Each of those students are responsible in their residential halls to do kind of short-term projects, whether organizing an event on campus or doing meetings with other students to talk about behavior change aspects, how they could be a little bit more greener, or putting up posters on the wall. So that's a program. A portfolio, which is a collection of projects and programs and other work that are grouped together to facilitate effective management to meet a strategic objective. So for instance, I manage a portfolio of projects. I've managed multiple programs, some involving energy efficiency, as well as renewable energy, but they're all separate little projects. They are not necessarily interdependent of each other and not necessarily directly related, so they can all operate on their own, although the benefit and knowledge from both places is helpful. So I think taking these definitions, it's really, it's a great way to step back and look at the work that you're doing and figuring out whether you are managing a project, whether you're managing a program, or whether you're managing a portfolio. Each has a kind of a little bit of a different mindset, but at the same time, kind of the scale and that you're working on. And then to differentiate between all those different management aspects, you have operations management. So a lot of us probably do this in that we manage the day-to-day operations of our organizations. So the difference between project management and operation management is that it sustains the organization and it's an ongoing process. So there's no defined beginning or endpoints. The outcome is not a unique product or service or result, and there are functional teams generally aligned with that organizational structure. So for instance, accounting would fall under operations. So what the things that they do are not necessarily unique products. They might be doing something like purchasing reallocations or procurement of products, but that just helps with the operations of the organization. As defined in project management, there are 5 different stages and processes in project management. There is the initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. And you could look at all the details as this is as defined from the Project Management Institute. But I think the key points about project management, and particularly by that definition, is that documentation is done throughout the life cycle of the project. It offers clear communication about the project scope and objectives and helps reduce any potential scope creeping or project bloating. So sometimes if we don't really put it on paper and work with our group and saying what the scope of our projects are, we end up adding more tasks than we really necessarily need to do. And at the end, either the product or the project does not fulfill the objective or is a little bit unmanageable. And I think also, as mentioned, understanding whether you're managing a project, a program, or portfolio, and then in comparison, understanding the percentage of time you manage those projects, programs, and portfolios versus doing general operations management. And also, as I pointed out, there is opportunity to become a certified project manager through the Project Management Institute. It's a series of exams and also kind of retaining hours in project management. But I don't think it's a really necessary step. As I pointed out, it's a framework to use. There's a lot of other frameworks that are used in different offices depending on the work environment. I think in an organization you have to develop a project management protocol that fits to your work environment and sometimes just what fits to that particular project. So I'm going to go into the next stage of talking about, sane project management. I believe it really begins with us. So the way we do it is kind of looking at our work from 30,000 plus feet. Just imagining being in an airplane, we know that we're in a certain area of the country. When we can see all the mountains and everything else, we can identify it. And in a lot of ways, it's the same way. We want to look at all the projects that we're doing in a particular frame of time to see what our agenda is. So developing a work plan that captures the areas that you're going to address, you have to kind of make sure that your work plan is developed within a time scale, so a week, a month, a quarter, or a year. In our case at UV, in the Office of Sustainability, we put everything around an academic year, so our work plan is designed around that. And we also make sure that our work plan aligns with our organization's strategic goals or our department's goals. And we also use those work plans as an evaluation tool, so a way of checking in about the progress on a project, but also a way to identify skills and knowledge areas to improve on and or learn. It helps us kind of figure out what conferences people should attend, whether it's necessary for them to go to different trainings, or whether we can develop a pool of talent in-house. So we started off a work plan kind of doing a brain dump. I sometimes use word clouds. I also use Post-it notes and write on paper, but it starts off as a brain dump, and then slowly organizing those concepts and ideas and what we're trying to do into a mind map. If you haven't tried mind mapping, it's a really great tool. It's also called idea mapping, and there's a lot of other, there's network matrix mapping, and essentially it's a visual tool for you to look at concepts and different tasks. And there's a lot of free software, as well as you could just do this with Post-it notes or on paper. It doesn't really have to be complicated. It's essentially the doodling you might do on a with a pen and a napkin. So the mind maps evolve into some kind of an exercise of developing our work plan. In our office, so on the right-hand side, what we did was we worked with our director. She has a work plan with her that the senior administrators review, and her agenda is pretty broad, but it falls into different categories. And what we did was we took big Post-it notes and laid out her entire one-year agenda. And we individually, the 5 other staff, we basically got our own color Post-it notes individually and wrote what task we were responsible for in each strategic goal area. And by looking back, it allows us to see where we work together, or where do we work independently, or how we help each other. And by doing that, we eventually get to shape our own individual work plans. And for us, we put percentages in each area that we work in and what our tasks and responsibilities are in those areas. And the key component about the work plan is that we make our work plans public. We publish our work plans on our website, and it's a great tool of setting up. In some ways, you know, you yourself as a project, you have your own scope, and also it allows you to create it allows you to basically create your buffer zone. So particularly if people are trying to ask you, like if you have a vendor or you have other organizations who kind of fall outside of the scope of your work, this is a great way to publicly say, you know, I would love to work with that. I don't really have time because it doesn't really fall within my agenda for this period of time. But let's see, you know, it's a good conversation piece, but it's also a way of preventing yourself being overworked. So I think some of the key aspects of maintaining sanity in a project is that it's okay to say no, and then to regret saying yes. And if we say yes, you know, if a yes starts to being one more item and another item onto your project that may not necessarily fit with the original scope of your project. And so saying no is okay. I also think that another recommendation, and we do this often in our office, is designating time to work alone and in a place where you can get work done. So not necessarily being in your office is the most productive space. And designating time in your calendar and letting other people see that is really helpful. In our office, we do a lot of telecommuting, and so we do block off a lot of time to do other projects or just even life balance stuff. And that's really helpful because all of our staff are very acutely aware of you know, whether not to intrude on some people's time so that they can keep getting things done. Another thing is I just think just get to know your team. This is an aside. I actually recently watched this on a TED Talk, and I thought it was an interesting group exercise. And it's called the Marshmallow Challenge. If you haven't checked it out, definitely check out the TED Talk, and there's the link there. Tom Mujek did this 5-minute talk about observing people who were taking part in this Marshmallow Challenge. And essentially the Marshmallow Challenge is an exercise that encourages teams to collaborate, innovate, and be creative, as well as an opportunity, I think, to look at a group's dynamics on a project. So identifying skills and areas where people can work well together, and rooms for improvement. What's interesting is the objective of the Marshmallow Challenge is to construct the tallest freestanding structure in 18 minutes from 20 sticks of spaghetti, 1 yard of tape, 1 yard of string, and a marshmallow, which has to be on the top. And the amusing part is the average is about 20 feet. But in a lot of ways, it's the challenge of seeing how different people plan and how they also give feedback and try different, through trial and error, build these structures. And the same would apply to your projects. I also think it's important to understand your work environment. So these are different examples. As I said, our office, we have a formal office where we all meet and organize, but a lot of the times we telecommute, just trying to reduce our emissions, but also knowing that places where we can concentrate and get our work done. So kind of the last aspect is finding a project management system that works for you and your team. And this is going to focus more on the tools aspect. Sorry about that. So when selecting a project management tool, I think it's important that it's accessible and it's web-based and it's cloud-based. In this day and age, with having smartphones and laptops and whatnot, you know, it's so important to have a centralized place, and having cloud-based service is really helpful. I think also that when selecting a tool, it has to function and make sense to you and your team. It has to be easy to use, and you should be able to work with internal and external collaborators on it. So it shouldn't be kind of, the access could be restricted on certain projects, but also it could be open to others who are outside of your organization to work with you. So when selecting a project management tool, I also think you have to account for the number of projects that you would have currently and the projects that you would have in the future, and also to account for online storage size and making sure it's sufficient and secure for your organization. You want to make sure you have an adequate space to put all your files and write all your notes, etc. And so that it accommodates that. Finally, I think a real big point is it should not break the bank. Kind of monthly or annual costs should be low or preferably free. But a lot of these services in their software allow you to do free or try it free or do trial services before you have to make a commitment to the service. So I could provide you probably a list of all the different services and software, but a really good link that I found on Wikipedia was a comparison chart of all these project management softwares and online services. So it gives you a good idea, and it's a good starting list to kind of shop around. So once you select the tool, what I highly recommend is giving your project management system a test drive for at least a month, and customizing that tool to your group's management needs. It's also important to train your collaborators and or staff on how to use the tool, and I can't emphasize that enough. You can't assume that everybody will understand that system, and sitting down with each individual or doing it in a group meeting is important so that everyone's on the same page. And if the system you select doesn't work for your group, then start shopping around again, and bring in those people who might have feedback about it to help you select those tools and try them out. So for our office, 3 years ago, we with the goal I had to kind of get all of our projects out in one place so that we could see it in a dashboard. I had gone through different services and checked out different places, and really what it came down to is expense as well as software package that really kind of reflects our office culture. So we selected 37 Signals Suite. Actually, initially we started with Basecamp, which is the project management system, and then we've gradually been evolving and working with these other services that 37 Signals provides. So Basecamp, one of the benefits is being able for us to see all our deadlines and our milestones and all of our projects in one place. So when we log in, we can everyone can see the projects that they are involved with and any updates that people have or notes. And you can also see the progress that's been made on a project. So kind of the questions that you should ask yourselves is, now and continuously is, what systems do you have in place to manage your projects, programs, and portfolios? And do you feel it's well organized and manageable? And are people who internally and external partners able to collaborate with you with the system that you have set up? And finally, it should be, does your PM system allow you to see your work from 30,000 feet? And also monitor its progress. For part of this webinar, I've also created a resource page with some of the links that I've mentioned and some of the books that I found interesting. And you can find it at this URL at http://tinyurl.com/ELP111. So I'm going to close. So as Errol mentioned, I'm a senior fellow in the Environmental Leadership Program, and it's been a really beneficial program. And I think if you have enjoyed the webinar, please consider donating any amount of money to our program. There's a lot of great knowledge from our fellows that can be shared with the environmental and social justice community. And just to let you know that there is an upcoming webinar on carbon offsets from residential energy efficiency, and that's going to be presented by a senior fellow, Stephen Arario. So if you want to register for that, definitely you can go to elpnet.org/eventsall. I think, and I'm done.
Great. Thank you so much, Mieko. At this time, we certainly will open it up to our participants' questions, but I did have one to get us started. I was wondering, Mieko, there's a lot of really great information throughout your webinar, including the resource links. I was wondering, though, if you had any suggestions about how individuals can get started in their workplace. I mean, all too often I think that individuals find themselves within a particular work culture, and there may be some resistance to trying something new, regardless of whether it's beneficial to the work environment in the end. But wondered if you had any ideas about how individuals can go about implementing some of the really great ideas that you have.
Well, I mean, I can say going backwards, looking at even just picking the tool, that it really takes several meetings, and also as yourself, the person who's maybe finding those systems for your organization, it takes time for people to adapt to them. Clearly, using something like Basecamp for ourselves, it took our staff over 1.5 years to fully embrace it. And it's just because it had to, eventually be something that they found as convenient and a tool that they could use to communicate where their projects were going. I think it really starts with you have to pilot it. You just got to just start with something, start small with one project, and kind of usually when you start a project, you want to identify an area where everyone could put all of their documents and how they can communicate with one another. And so I think you gotta just start small. So maybe starting with your first project, and before addressing something larger like a program.
Oops, sorry about that. Aside from Basecamp, what are the other popular project management programs that are available?
I believe there's Zoho. There is a few other ones. One of the ones that we were looking at was something called PyMatrix, and that was a tool that was developed here at UVM, but is made available online. And I guess I mean, if you just put in Google like project management, it's kind of, you can find a whole list of services. But I think that Wikipedia list is a really comprehensive list. I actually haven't really found any comprehensive list like that before, and it really lays out all the different aspects, like everything from collaboration to setting up schedules and stuff like that.
Okay. There have been several questions related to Google and Google applications for project management. Do you have any expertise or ideas about how we can incorporate some of the Google platforms into project management?
Sure. I've used Google a lot initially before going into using something like Basecamp. So Google, one of the things is I usually work with a group and say, you know, here we would use Google Docs as our central place for kind of working on a document and making sure it's the most up-to-date, making sure that also kind of the underlying rule is that no one emails each other the document, because you'll have multiple versions. And so working with the real-time basis of Google Docs. Google Calendar is helpful. I think setting up I don't know if you can have the group function anymore, but having the group function and having it built in with the calendar and Google Docs is really helps a lot. But otherwise, I think the only difficult challenge I have with Google Docs is that the kind of seeing a progress bar and where you are in a project is difficult. Although I think you could come up with something.
Okay. There was another question here about how to determine if it's more efficient to do a project yourself rather than coordinate a project.
Oh. I generally look at it, so I usually look backwards. So I look I plan backwards. So I look at the overall project. What is the outcome supposed to be? What's the deliverable? And I start to list out kind of what are the steps, what are the things necessary to get that deliverable to happen, and then assess kind of what are my skills. And if it becomes like a little overburdened that you have to do too many things, like in that you just couldn't, you couldn't do it all at once, then you just start involving a lot of other people. But I usually do a list. I start writing out what the deliverable is, and then I start doing a list of like what are the things that are needed, and then what will it take in terms of the tasks, and then start looking at my calendar and other factors and say, is it really something that I can do, or should I split this job up into different parts?
How do you attain support for home-based work when your boss generally wants to see you present in the office? Is there some aspect of project management that provides support for something like this?
Yeah. So in our office, a lot of what we do is we make sure we put in our schedule to do office time, like meetings and check-ins. We also utilize Skype a lot. So that helps, but I think that sometimes you just got to make sure you have like sometimes office time and also meeting time, and then also time just making sure, being clear about how you're utilizing that time at home, and being able to show those results.
That's great. Can you tell us a little bit about how we can best use help from interns, either from undergraduates or graduate students?
Yeah, so interns, I think I do the same thing with the interns that we do with our staff. I start off with looking at what their project is, or what they're supposed to help us with, And then I start doing a work plan. And on Basecamp, in our project management system, the way we do is we sit down with our students and we go, okay, here's your job description. This is what you're due. Here are the tasks you're supposed to do. And then we set up milestones of, if they're coordinating an event, we'll say, well, the event's taking place here. We need to do X, Y, and Z things in order for that event to happen. And we sit down and put a task list together on our project management system so they can check it off. And also, one of the ways we hold them accountable is that they track their time, and they have to tell us kind of how many hours that they work and what they're doing. And that's beneficial to them. I mean, it may seem a little bit drudge work, but we tell them that they can't get paid until they tell us what they've done with their hours. We kind of take a consultant model in some sense. And also, the benefit is that if they want to get recommendations, and sometimes you have a myriad of students that you work with or interns that you work with, basically we could pull up that document, that record of what they're doing, and we could say they spent this many hours, or this is the main task they do, and write a great recommendation for them.
Okay. Time management is, always comes up in terms of project management, maintaining efficiency, New Year's aspirations. Do you have any recommendation of time management frameworks that you found particularly helpful?
I often, in our organization, having a common calendar really helps, and being able to have a calendar where everyone can see what everyone's been doing, that helps a lot. Blocking off time helps, and I think also what helps is just being able to, like, when you block off time, to say what are you hoping to achieve, and actually writing in your calendar what you want to achieve at the end of in that period of time. So that's often what I do in my calendar, is saying, I'm going to do X activity, and it's going to take this long, and I want to I hope to accomplish it by the end of that time.
Okay. Excuse me, we had one more question here about in regards to your work at UVM and your sustainability office. Are there any simple steps that you can take to organize a sustainability program if you don't yet have a staff to manage or to delegate to?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people are when they're in the early stage, they're in a lot of committees, and I think coming up with a communication plan is really helpful in terms of, you need to set up a particular, like, one agenda, and with that group of people, and just start developing a list and for them to work off of. And that's really, I think it's a challenge, because you're working with individual people who are in different departments, but at the same time, if you can keep a task, keep an agenda, a project agenda, really simple and achievable, and make sure it's within a certain time frame. And I think it takes a lot of follow-up and persistence to make sure those projects, as a manager, in a lot of ways, you're a cheerleader, and you're also, you're looking out at how the project is happening. So I think you have to, I think persistence is really a key thing, and being also flexible that things might not exactly happen as you had hoped.
Do you have any suggestions about how you approach your day? This is a question really in regards to intentionality and making sure that your goals for the day actually do get accomplished, in terms of designating time for long-term projects versus daily responsibilities, emails, inquiries, returning phone calls, and things of that nature.
Yeah. So my intentionality is there's a lot of flexibility in the way I work. So I kind of I do things in motion. To me, the most important thing when I entered into my job was establishing systems so that I know I have backups, and I can always know that I can pull anything off the shelf when I need to. And so I have a lot of flexibility in my day-to-day work of spending a period of time on certain projects and finishing things. So everything from doing content management on our website, I'll spend a chunk of time, but then I can also flow into doing something like writing emails that relates to a project that I'm doing and following up with people. But I definitely my intentionality is always to make, around what I do is really based on the structures I've created. And just as I said, convenience is really, and flexibility is important to me. So the way we have our project management system is you can pull anything off the site and be able to work straight away on it, and then put it back in. So I think that's been helpful.
Do you have any suggestions on how to get non-sustainability focused employees or students energized and rallying beyond, towards those type of initiatives? Is there a way to use sustainable behaviors, introducing them into their day or project management plans?
Yeah, so I actually, with working with my interns, even though they're green focused, I usually stick to real and just anybody, like any skill that people can benefit or knowledge that they can benefit from. So so for instance, I don't really focus on the content sometimes, but I focus on the skill that somebody is going to develop or be able to get PR for. So for maybe and the outsider, like an operations person who works on the heating and cooling plant, they kind of have a vague idea about kind of environmental work, but they don't have a great interest in it. But there is a way of saying, well, what other skill, what if we could send you to a conference or something else, like what the skills they can gain, and then them being kind of a consultant to our group and informing us about things. That's kind of how we trying to attract people to something. We try doing it indirectly.
Okay. Is there a communication plan available online as a reference? Do you have any ideas of where people might be able to find one of those?
So in terms of, like, I guess I need some clarification.
Sure. In communicating your intent, you talked about that you communicate this externally through UVM's sustainability website, and was there a guide that you all used for that, or a template, or is that something that you had created on your own?
We created it on our own. So our work plan is our communication to the outside environment. We have our website as well, which is a really good content management system, but we utilize our work plan to communicate what our agenda is and kind of what areas we're focused on, and that helps a lot in terms of just setting up boundaries for yourself and also just keeping people aware of what you're involved in. I mean, in our office, and I think generally in work, sometimes you just get called by people who don't really spend time on your website, and they don't really understand your organization, and they want to tell you about their services. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I tell people that if it's not on my work plan or it's not some part of our agenda, and it's throwing it back to the other person, is to do their research and to understand us is probably the key way of working with us. But if it doesn't have anything to do with our agenda, I generally kind of give and I communicate to that individual and say, probably another time, or I suggest someone else to go to.
Okay. Just so folks know, this webinar is being recorded, and we plan to have it in our archive, which is located at www.elpnet.org/webinar-archive. So we plan to have that up in the archive, and certainly will be on our homepage by the end of this week. That's about all the time that we have for today's program. I do certainly want to thank Mieko for her expertise and for all of you joining. For those of you who are interested in continuing this conversation, we've built in a little bit of time to continue via Facebook. For those of you that would like to join us on the ELP Facebook page. Again, we would be happy to see your thoughts, comments, and suggestions. and certainly look forward to your continued participation in future ELP webinars. So Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you again for joining, and have a great and intentional rest of your week.